Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Rising to talk in this address and reply, I want to start on a fairly sober note, and it is the Queensland road toll, which is really so devastating because it's more than just a number. The 275 deaths on our roads throughout Queensland in the last year, a tragic spike of 56 more than the year before, represents not only 275 families but a multitude of their friends and other relatives and a community that will never forget what they've faced by losing those loved ones and the many other ones who have also been injured, sometimes injured for life. This is devastating, and Queensland's had one of the worst road tolls we've seen since 2012. There'll be analysis as to why that's occurred, because it's contrary to what's happened, as I understand, in all other states, and the ACT is not a state. I believe they had an increase. However, we should not lose focus on this. I am concerned, and while there'll be analysis as to the reasons why, we do know that the traffic police in many of our areas, with that thin blue line, was a lot thinner in the last 12 months because of the extraordinary work that all police were doing. And we always commend and applaud our emergency services. But the situation was, with police backing up on a lot of COVID duties and making sure people were keeping to their requirements and the law that needed to be kept as part of the extraordinary times of COVID, we saw in sometimes only one car, as I understand, on traffic duties on the whole of the Sunshine Coast, in a region with more than 340,000 people. You replicate that across all the other regions, and you have to say it does not help to lose that blue line of safety on our roads of our police. And I want to speak out about this because, for all the things that we need to look at to ensure that our road toll goes down and that more families don't suffer the bereavement, the injury, the economic loss, as well as the devastating grief that they'll carry for the rest of their lives, we must look at this, but we must also stand up for those police officers and traffic officers to be able to be properly resourced on our roads, in our community, and being a visual presence. Being a visual presence, it's vitally, vitally important. I was horrified when I heard that there were as few as maybe one only car on the road of traffic police some days on the Sunshine Coast during last year. And that's something that we do need to call out, because I think it has had a contributory impact upon those numbers that we've seen come to bear in the last 12 months. The address and reply traditionally is an opportunity for members, once election's been held, responding to the Governor, who essentially presents the agenda of the government at the opening of Parliament, for us to speak about our return to this Parliament, our vision for our electorates. We've already, many of us, had an opportunity to address many issues during the budget reply, and it's just the quirk of Parliament that the address and reply is as late as it is. But I do want to raise a number of issues for my electorate of the Sunshine Coast, and specifically my electorate of Maroochydore. I am passionate about the Sunshine Coast, grew up on the coast, going to local primary schools, Croy and Yandina, and then Nambour State High School. I'd like to remind people that there are other politicians who've come out of Nambour State High School rather than a former Labor Prime Minister. But I am passionate about the Sunshine Coast and passionate about ensuring that we get it right with the fact many people are moving into our beautiful region, but we've got to get that balance of growth and livability right, and the services that are needed to ensure that our economy is able to grow and people are able to keep the amenity in our environment that they so love. The last year has been extremely challenging for so many in our state and nation across globally with the COVID pandemic. I am committed to working with the Sunshine Coast community and particularly our small business and family enterprises to help them grow, to create the jobs and have not only a lifestyle but a livelihood. And I think one of the things that stands out through last year with the first round of impacts of the shutdowns and grappling with the devastation that could be of a pandemic, where small business people who probably would never need to go and seek help from someone, who were just absolutely chopped off at the legs, and to find people who are independent, self-starters, created their own lifestyles and their businesses, not taking a dime from government, finding themselves in a situation where they didn't know how they were going to pay staff or whether they'd have that business tomorrow. And it was quite extraordinary to have such a sudden onslaught of people in that desperate situation reaching out and needing help. And I do recognise what the federal government did by implementing the JobKeeper in particular was very, very important to ensuring a number of those businesses through those uncertain initial phases didn't go under. But we know that won't be the story for everyone because the story of COVID is still unfolding. But I will be fighting for my small and family enterprises on the Sunshine Coast, as well as other businesses that have a vision and a capacity to grow and build the jobs that we need. I will also be fighting for the right infrastructure. And Queensland particularly has had a deficit proportionately in the infrastructure investment as a proportion of budget compared to most other states. And it's vitally important that there is an investment. And I talked about the road toll before, but certainly safe roads need input into construction that will also keep people alive on our roads. Mooloolah River Interchange. Now, this business case, we've talked about it in here because it seems to be the never-ending business case that keeps on going, and it's still going on. The government had it in their Q-trip for 2017, 2018. There were some works that were done in 2017-18. And then what we've seen still in the current Q-trip, where there is about $500,000 in funding for this financial year for this $7.5 million business case still to be completed. For goodness sake, just start this project. I talked about lives. Well, this is an interchange that's at the nexus of the Nicklin Way and the Sunshine Motorway near the Mooloolah River that has claimed lives. And it is a bottleneck. It is a safety issue, but it's also an economic issue as people find that they cannot move north or south, east or west when the worst of this interchange goes into gridlock. It's about time the works were started. Under the LNP, when we were in government a number of years ago, we started the process of acquiring most of the properties that were required for part of that alignment, but the works need to start. This business case has gone on too long. It's time for the works to start, and the preloading on that type of soil, it's not an easy area. It needs to start, and lives need to be protected by the right infrastructure. Sunshine Motorway is the same. We see with this two-lane arterial road, once again, tragically, too many lives lost because the ones who are dying may not be the ones who've made the mistake. But when you've got two-lane high-speed arterial roads with high volumes of traffic, there is always a greater risk that people will make a mistake and take somebody else's life out. And that's unfortunately what we've seen as an increasing risk. And we do need to see this important arterial upgraded and the works and plans put in place to bring that about. The mass transit scheme is getting a lot of controversy on the Sunshine Coast, and the state government has thrown planning money in to match the Sunshine Coast Council on investigating mass transit between Caloundra and Maroochydore. And Council were very heavily focused on this being light rail, and their initial preliminary business case envisaged a very high level of density in the increase in population between Maroochydore and Caloundra, over and above what the town plan had previously envisaged. Now that this new drop of funding into this new business case, yes, another business case, it's not supposed to focus just on light rail, but we do know that has been a key focus of the council. And quite frankly, it's like the cart being put before the horse, when this plan has no intention, as I understand, to even look at the traffic impacts, look at the integrated transport needs of not only that corridor but how it fits within the greater transport network. There has to be a Sunshine Coast public transport and integrated transport plan. It's just dumb to be studying a so-called mass transit option that doesn't take into account how much extra congestion for those in cars if you take rows of traffic, if you take lanes of traffic off those corridors. To me, how stupid can that be as a method of investigating the right infrastructure for a growing area? So please, stop wasting money on dumb projects like this, put it into the right planning and get going on building the right infrastructure. When dollars are so tight, it's about time this was done right. And is it any wonder, take another project, I did hear that rather illuminating address of the member for Mermaid Beach, and while I won't pick up on all the strands, I will pick up on one, and that was obviously a similar issue they've had about cycleways in beach areas. And the Transport Minister was pretty gung-ho about dropping money in with council once again, but creating a barrier to our beach and some of our areas that wasn't really about looking at all the users in these areas. And I support safer bikeways and safer pedestrian pathways. But the arrogance and the way that this project was being pushed through until the community rightly said, hang on a moment, we don't want this barrier of concrete and metal between us and the beach in an area where we've got literally thousands of people using this area. Listen to us first so that we can ensure that the right infrastructure keeps our amenity, allows people to use these spaces in a way and doesn't have the arrogance of people loading a very unpopular and badly designed plan over the top of them, taking out car parking, disrupting people's actual access to this beautiful area. In this case, Alexandra Headland and the beach between Maroochydore and Alex in that area. This is why we want to ensure that the right infrastructure supports our amenity and our growth and that the people are listened to, because, you know, it's everyone's interest to ensure that we maintain our environment and our amenity and you listen to the people. I want to address Mooloolaba Harbour entrance, and this is something that a number of years ago we were successful in having pipelines put in place to connect to dredges to help in the maintenance process of keeping that harbour entrance open. But in the last 5 years, there's been an increasing amount of shoaling near the entrance of the harbour that's made it increasingly difficult for the dredges that have been operating to be able to keep on top of that. And obviously there are times in the year when the weather is worse and it's difficult anyway. But Mooloolaba Harbour is one of the jewels in the crown of Queensland's seafood industry. Now, I'm a big fan of Mooloolaba prawns and all the other wonderful seafood that we have coming in and out of this port, but we need a safe harbour entrance, and we need it for not only the fishing industry but the recreational industry, also for those pilot ships that those pilots that take the big ships in and out of Moreton Bay. They are actually coming out of Mooloolaba Harbour on those yellow pilot boats that enable those big freighters to come and go into Moreton Bay safely. But Mooloolaba Harbour has, unfortunately, increasingly become dangerous, and what was working in the past has, of recent times, not been as effective. There has been a study undertaken, and I acknowledge that, and I understand that it was supposed to be released before Christmas, but additional works have been done. I'm calling on the Transport Minister to certainly ensure that report is available as soon as it's finalised, so that we can go into bat for the right solution. There are a number of options. I understand that they're looking at if it is an extension of the breakwater, that obviously is a process that has to be appropriately worked through so that the environmental considerations are considered. But currently, this harbour entrance is dangerous. It is a situation where it's become more so. Why has there been more sand sand drifting to the north. That may not in fact be correct, but that's what some pundits claim, that it's not just the weather, that there has been a worsening of the way that the sand has been shoaling and the movements along our coastline. You do need to be very careful, though, because when you're dealing with beautiful beaches, even if they're not beautiful beaches, you've got to be very careful. And we do have beautiful beaches, and to ensure that any works that are done, that you understand and you don't have unintended consequences for the beaches to the north, or in fact for the surfers who also have an interest, as do anybody who loves our beautiful maritime environment in this area. I want to also address another issue, and that's Mooloolaba Spit. A lot of the Mooloolaba Spit along Park and Parade is actually state land once you go past the freehold property and accommodation. And there are a number of operators there in the fishing industry, community organisations such as our Coast Guard, who I'm proud to be a patron of. But the end of the Spit is an area where there are old government buildings, some of which need to be knocked down, that are on the way out. There are derelict. There is a need to have the right service buildings there to service our recreational and fishing industry. However, the state government has not been upfront about the investigation of commercial opportunities and partnering with the commercial sector to potentially redevelop the end of the Spit. Now, why on earth would they go out to market and seek expressions of interest in regard to what could be done at the end? And I've got copies of some of those documents, if they weren't serious about considering some of those options. At the end of the day, I'm calling on the government to release all of the documents, release this information, ensure that the intention of the original Mooloolaba Spit master plan, the intention of keeping as much public open space, is maintained, that this area is not developed for commercial activities with potential, even commercial developments that are medium-rise. You can argue about what's high-rise and medium-rise, but anything that is densifying the construction in that area would be a detriment to the amenity, but also potentially to the services that operate there. The last thing you want is someone coming up with a deal with government and saying, oh, I'll put accommodation down at the end of the Spit. And next thing, you've got a conflict with those fishing industries, the water police that operate out of there, our maritime services, the shark nets, everything. You want to ensure that you protect not only the amenity but those critical services, and don't compromise it with a backroom deal over potential commercial development that is inappropriate for this location. Let's save Mooloolaba Spit and protect public spaces and the local environment. I want to briefly touch on another very serious issue. I can't talk in detail because there's legislation before the House, but the hooning issue and the safety of people in our streets, this has really exploded. I talked before about the road toll spiking last year in Queensland and the tragedy of those 275 people who lost their lives. But hooning has also spiked, and I'm calling on the state government to reinstitute the combined operations between transport officers and police. And I know that resources have been tight as police have been pulled off a lot of frontline duties in our area, but we need this because it's about safety as well as amenity of our local residents. And we're hearing this story around Queensland. In the few minutes that are left on the clock, I want to thank all of my wonderful volunteers, my LNP members, and the many who believe in the vision that we have for the Sunshine Coast and making it a better place and building a better Sunshine Coast. I want to thank my staff, Summer and Robin, for the magnificent way you look after people. And there are so many I can individually name, but I do want to say this. I've never seen the sort of housing crisis we've seen now. And my staff, day on, day out, are dealing with people who are in distress, who cannot – social housing, that's just not available for the majority, even a rental house, and trying to help people who never expected they'd find themselves in such dire situation. And my staff deal with people with great sympathy, empathy and help, but we need better solutions than what we've seen to deal with the distress, with more available housing, particularly helping the private sector unlock those opportunities for people.